Good morning. This is Professor David Weiss speaking again from New Jersey City University and its Connecting Bridges and Borders program. Our series continues now with India, which is a very important nation state within our society and is an important ally to the United States, and is an emphasis on not just global business and global affairs, but also deals with many tangential issues that affect us all, both on an international cross-border perspective, but also within the United States. I am pleased today that I have such distinguished guests speaking on the topic of both science, entrepreneurship, as well as social programs that affect not only India, but also affect the United States as well. And this is where the common interest lies. We have Dr. Mehta, who is a neonatologist dealing with prenatal care as well as on postnatal care, over 30 years of experience. We have also with us Dr. Shah, who's a pediatrician for more than 22 years, that is also dealing with infectious disease. We have Sridhar Rajagopalan, I hope I'm saying it right, sir, who's an educational entrepreneur and deals within the spatial sector of both education and how to incorporate innovation entrepreneurship within those platforms. And then finally, we have Mr. Arora, Mohit Singh Arora, who is also risk management and is dealing with some of these important social issues that we are seeing in the United States as well, respective to the homeless. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. We're doing well.
So I think we'd like to start, since we have such a wide, diverse discussion of topics, which also correlate back to economic, not only policy, but also economic behavior. And we're going to use the theme of the common thread, which is addressing now this new normal that we seem to have found ourselves in vis-a-vis the COVID-19. So I'd like to start out with our medical team on today from India, and get some understanding and context of what you're seeing on the front lines. And first, I want to thank you very much for the work you're doing and the honor that you are really deserving, not only to those you're caring for, but also most importantly, for also the exposure you're giving yourself and the risk you're taking. And all over the world, we're all applauding our medical support teams, our doctors. You really have earned a badge of courage, as they say. So, Dr. Mehta, please, can you sort of talk a little bit about what you are facing, what you're seeing when it comes to, really what we refer to as sort of the pediatrician side of this medical process, if you can, with young babies, and the uniqueness you're seeing within specifically COVID-19, and whether or not you're concerned that there may be some implications or repercussions to babies that are being born.
Yeah, I think this is a new virus for all of us. So as we know, there is not much literature and research and data about what happens to the mothers and the babies, except there are about 5 or 6 papers and presentations from China, where they have identified 38 to 40 mothers who were COVID positive during pregnancy. But we have experience of the SARS, MERS, H1N1, and now with the COVID-19. Fortunately, COVID-19 is much better than the SARS and MERS. The SARS and MERS had attacked the mothers in that third intrapartum pregnancy in a very bad way, with very high morbidity and mortality. Versus COVID-19, we haven't seen that much of the trouble with the pregnant mothers and the newborn babies. So far, there are only 4 to 5 babies who have turned out to be positive. But we know the viremia in different viruses from our experience with other diseases. And usually what happens that if you acquire the infection about a week to 15 days before delivery, then you pretty much recover and pass immunity to the babies. because when you create IgG antibodies in your body, the mother can pass it on through the placenta to the baby, which protects the baby. But if you happen to have infection right around the time of delivery, which in most of these positive cases, it was 3 to 7 days before delivery.
Dr. Mehta, I was going to ask you before the connection sort of went, you were trying to explain about the placenta and what you've seen. So please continue, because I wanted to ask you a question about the placenta and whether or not you think there's some opportunity value there in research that could be done if a mother's infected and then has that in the placenta or the umbilical cord, that possibly could be something to be explored as well. And this will, Dr. Shah, when we have a moment to speak with you in a second, I'd like to sort of have you explore that.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is something called plasmapheresis, which is a part of the treatment for extremely sick COVID-19 patients. So I think there will be a role for that. Right now, we are not using like cord blood transplant, which started in 1990s, early 90s. And it helped us a lot with a lot of bone marrow transplant kind of diseases. And it was pretty much replacing the bone marrow transplant when you use the cord blood bank blood. So we are using the cord blood for that. So there will be a role in the future for that kind of antibodies. If we can find that blood, we can pass it on to the, it's called passive immunity, not active. Like active immunity is from the vaccine, but passive is when you can simply give the antibodies to the patient. So there will be, but right now there are only 3 cases where they were like IgM positive, because as I said, IgG antibody can pass through the placenta. So that is the immunity part. But if you have IgM in the newborn, that means the baby had already developed infection before coming out. And that has happened only in 3 cases in China. So there is a possibility that babies may get infected even before coming out.
Interesting.
And that is not clear yet, because all the other cases of newborn positive are after the delivery. So there is a big question that whether there is an in utero infection or not. Right now, we think that it does not happen, but there are 3 cases in the back of the mind. So we have to think about that.
And that's a very important point. And that's a great segue, Dr. Shah, back to you with your specialty, not only in pediatrician, but infectious disease. What's your take on that?
Yes, sir. One thing I want to share you, there's a huge innovation by Indian Railways that rest of the world should look after it. Our Indian Railways converted almost 5,000 coaches to 80,000 ICU beds. So that's a great innovation. India is a huge country, huge population. We are a developing country. So to reach up to the end user with all facilities and everything. So I would like to say this is a great idea, and we are prepared for any emergencies, any increase in number of cases, whether they require oxygen, ventilators, medical, paramedical staffs. We don't have a great infrastructure, so can we easily reach to the remote places of the villages, suburb places. So I would like to share this idea, and the rest of the world should look after this idea. It's a great innovative and business concept from Indian Railway. No other country has come out with this type of idea, and they have converted these things within 3-5 days. So it's a great idea.
And one of the things that I'm hearing then is about the supply chain and developing out this supply chain in a faster, more expedient way. And obviously, as you know, here in the United States, this has become a reality of a larger scope issue that we've had here since the breakdown of manufacturing from the 1980s and the exportation due to labor costs, offshoring, which mainly found its way to China, starting with the open door policy under President Richard Nixon. So your point is well taken, Doctor. My question is a little bit more maybe specific to this issue that is complicated with the fact that we have 3 babies, for example, from China. One of the things we're seeing in the United States, and I'm not sure whether or not you're seeing it as an infectious disease doctor as well, but the morphing or the changing or the sort of, we'll call it this almost HIV sort of delivery system within the context of the virus itself. And that by what I mean by HIV delivery system, the fact that you can have it, you can be asymptomatic, you can wind up actually becoming symptomatic, you can recover, but then it's still in your body, whether it's in your lung tissue, your heart tissue, it's somewhere in the body. Are you finding concerns over exactly what type of virus you're dealing with or the strains or mutations of it in India?
Yes, definitely, sir. There are all chances of antigenic drifting may occur due to this type of different type of viruses. So we may come across the resistance of different type of drugs. Vaccines may or may not be effective because of this change of virus antigenic drifting. So it's a great concern, sir. You are right.
And how do you see the developing world? Even though the India is part of what you refer to as the BRICS nation states and is sort of a bifurcation of the developing world to the extent of its economic productivity. But in the larger scope of the Pan-Asian, Pan-Pacific region, which India is very close in proximity to, where you have 1 billion people in Indonesia, what are some of the challenges if we sort of focus on that area? I mean, Africa certainly may have its own challenges. South America will have its challenges. What are some of the salient infectious disease concerns that you see that either the WHO or other international organizations must get in front of now, such as even IMF, to address what you referred to as the supply chain or the economic issue of treatment and delivering?
There are a lot of challenges which can be encountered by the WHO developing countries. Like we don't have a good infrastructure. So doctors' facilities, paramedical staff's facilities, we don't have a trained person and trained ventilators, ICUs. So there are a lot of challenges, sir.
And are you concerned that with the defunding of WHO from the United States, that sends sort of a message that is a concern?
Yes, sir. So definitely concerned, because just now your Prime Minister has warned the WHO that they won't provide the fund, and that your country is supplying like 15% of total WHO funding. So that's a great concern. And like China is talking about with the idea that if USA won't fund it, then we are ready. We will be fund that the WHO. So if USA suppress that fund, so that's a great concern, sir.
And I guess my last follow-up question.
All the Melinda Foundation and Bill Gates Foundations are doing the great work.
Yeah.
It won't be possible with if the USA won't fund the WHO, because they're like giving 4,000 crores rupees. It's a huge fund.
Well, that's a good segue into Mr. Arora. I mean, you're also on the front lines in a very dramatic way that connects to this discussion that Dr. Shah and I were just having. I'm sure you have a lot of comments on this, but given the work you're doing, trying to support the homeless in India, which is, exponential in population compared to the United States. But as you know, here in the United States, we have on the rise, even before the pandemic, our urban cities have really just exploded from San Francisco to Seattle to New York, with a very large homeless population. And of course, as you can imagine, from an economic perspective, with almost 20 million Americans out of work right now, even as we try to open back up the economy, that compression is going to wind up with additional levels and layers of homeless. How are you dealing with it in India right now? And what are the concerns that you have there? And what are some of the lessons that we could be learning from you?
Thank you, David, for this. So India is obviously in a lockdown of a good 30 days. So it was earlier till 21st, and the government had decided to stretch it till 3rd. So the first three thought which come to our mind, which will be impacted, is one is the migrant labor and the labor class, which is working on a daily wages. The second part which will be impacted would be the middle class, because right now the concern is they might lose jobs, which might turn into again an employment issue or economic issue in future. And the third is to ensure that the food is reaching out to the public in terms of migrant labor, in terms of people who survive on a daily basis. So these are the quick concern which we see. Government is obviously playing their big role in terms of supporting employment, supporting food, supplying these food to the areas where people are highly impacted. Government has announced various package, as in financial package as well as food package. This is what they are doing. So this is what government is playing their critical role. While there are organization like the organization I am from, Robin Hood Army, where we are supporting senior citizens right now, because these are the people who are highly impacted, as well many people have said. So during this time we are supporting them, and once the lockdown is lifted, we have made our own plans to support millions of people across India and across nations as well, to ensure that at least once they are back on their job, they should not worry about the food or collecting or spending their money on food. So having a continuous supply on the food chain is what our primary focus is. Thank you.
And you know, you mentioned your good work that you do with the Robin Hood Foundation or organization. Sorry,
Robin Hood Army. It's a name. It's a trust, but we have name is as Robin Hood Army.
Understand. So because you're out there in the community, one of the other things that we've been also hearing about, which is separate from the homeless, but maybe you can sort of give us some understanding and scope. When the lockdown occurred, a lot of international people and expats were sort of stranded in India. And there's been reporting of backlash to a number of these people throughout India, even where hotels, hostels started not even wanting them to be there anymore, and there was nowhere for them to go. And there were amazing stories as well of people local to the community helping them and bringing them into their homes and getting them to other places, into more the urban areas of whether it's New Delhi or Mumbai. What's going on with that situation? Can you help us understand what happened there in terms of on the community level, and are things improving with that situation?
If I just reiterate it right, the question is not only specific to the expats, but also to the community in India and the people impacted in India, right?
So it's actually developed into another secondary reactionary issue as well.
So immediate impact which we have observed during this time was many of the people, or many of the population in India have their children staying away, okay, and their parents are staying in India, or probably they're in a different city. The first challenge which they face is they cannot go out, they cannot consume, or they cannot buy their daily groceries, because their children or their son is not available in India, or probably they are in the different city. So the first challenge which we have seen is senior citizen starving from buying a daily groceries need, or going to a local shop and buying the stuff. So this is one of the primary concern which we came through. So through Robin Hood Army, we started an initiative called Senior Patrol. With the strength of around 60,000 volunteers across India and in 150 active cities, what we do is we have a platform where anybody can register a request saying that, okay, my parents or a relative of mine who is senior citizen, he's staying in this area and he require pulse, or he require grain, or he require important medicine which he is not able to go out and buy. Can you guys help us? So with the spread of these volunteer network, we get this request, we pass it down to the lowest city available. So let's say if it is in New Delhi or Mumbai, I get a request on my central database. I'll forward it to my representative in Delhi. From Delhi team, they will find out somebody living in the local area there. They will fetch those groceries, they will fetch those medicine and pass on to those senior citizens staying there. So this is one of the initiative which we are doing.
That's a fantastic concept, and it's something that we're really starting to recognize, which is this more academic, or in the case of what you're doing, is the civic, grassroots, localized economic supply chain, as Dr. Shah was pointing out, that then comes upstream to more of the national framework in order to access the essential products or goods or medical supplies necessary, rather than the paradigm of going from the national framework, trying to create a one-size-fits-all paradigm, and then do a distribution, which of course is in a situation like this is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all, depending on what state, what region, what the age of the population is, all these sort of systematic issues you raise. So these are interesting observations that you're making as well, and they play a little bit on both what Dr. Mehta and Dr. Shah said. I'd like to turn for a moment to some of these system design possible proposals to our good friend here, Sridhar, who is on the education entrepreneurship side. At New Jersey City University, through its innovation entrepreneurship project that we've recently launched under our Institute for Dispute Resolution. This system is actually powered by startup tribes, which is a very important element of community outreach that connects back educationally to promote innovation and culture within the ecosystem of a localized region. For example, in our city, Jersey City, which is a very important city, but is also right now going through a significant impact to the COVID-19, given it being an outlier of the New York City metropolitan area. But being more optimistic and looking out into the future, we believe organizations like Startup Tribe will play a significant role in some of these system designs, approaches that could be utilized in not only the education ecosystem, but then as a civic grassroots initiative to sort of go outwards, if you will, into the larger scope community within its borders or within its footprint. Can you give us a little understanding of the good work you've been doing in innovation and entrepreneurship vis-a-vis your educational background, but also the system that you created? And I'd like to also ask you, within that system, if there are other innovation concepts like mediation that could play a role in that process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be speaking to all of you. But so one of the things that we have always identified is that, in a circumstance like this, which was like completely unanticipated, and one of the ecosystems that have kind of suffered across the world, it has been the schools. And so schools are shut, and this has a number of implications. I mean, it also means that children are at home, but it also means that learning can suffer, and this is something that you don't want, because it can have a long-term impact. This is whether it is college students who would be in the process of graduation and moving on their careers, or younger children who are going through an important phase, and you don't want a situation where they completely lose touch of learning. And this again influences families at different levels. You have the well-to-do, who are able to arrange some kind of education, but then you also have the poor. And one of the things that we have tried to do is to have these kind of learning systems which supplement the work of the teacher, but also allow for self-learning, which means that children are able to pick up what they would have otherwise been doing in the class. So one of our systems is MindSpark, that I think you're aware of, which helps children learn the basic concepts that they have to learn at their own pace. So it allows teachers to guide if they need to on an online basis or with their support. But if that is not available, the children can continue to do their work, and they progress. And depending on whether they are able to spend, so we find some children kind of regularly being able to spend half an hour to 1 hour a day, and that's one kind of a thing. but there's another child who, due to their circumstances, is able to say spend only that much time in a week. And you don't want those children to fall behind. So in terms of adjusting to where they were, what their level is, what they are actually learning, what their own level of learning is. So a system like this allows, and what we did, like other companies who work in this space, we've kind of made it freely available for 60 days as of now, and we will extend that if required. So this has helped in terms of students continuing their learning. It has been, so we have found cases, especially among the better off schools, where they are doing video lessons and online classes, but not all schools are able to do that. So these are situations where one is working to ensure that the learning does not stop for the different level of children. It could be children right from grades 2 and 3, but also in the higher grades when they have their own commitments to complete.
Well, I'm sorry, continue, please. That's a very, very fascinating delivery system that you have, especially for those that don't have, or states, even in the United States, that are very limited on its resources due to the compression within the taxpayer base. So we have those, of course, as you point out, that have access to more tools and resources that allow them to learn online. But there's another whole segment of even the United States population that does not. And what mindset is it? MindSpot is doing is something that can be actually crossed over here into the United States as well. Continue with your thought, please, Sridhar, what you also want to.
Yeah, I was also going to talk about entrepreneurship a bit, because one of the things that we are seeing currently in India is a very, very vibrant entrepreneurial culture. And some of these entrepreneurs are working in areas like education, others are looking at health, looking at ways that systems like these can be delivered to people who don't have access to them. And we are finding that some of these platforms are actually helping these entrepreneurs work together, find solutions where some may not have been possible. Or we have examples of educational companies who had technology access, the ability to create apps, using that ability to create apps that can be used in a situation like COVID-19. So this is where we find that the whole role of entrepreneurship, in order to approach a problem which was like unanticipated and suddenly came upon society, has been really important. And one is, and this is true for examples around the world, but we find that having this kind of a vibrant entrepreneurial culture that one is able to support can be a good way to find some of these solutions that can address these challenges, either directly in terms of the challenges in fighting a problem like COVID, which could either be medically or in terms of issues like contact tracing or identifying people who are potentially maybe more risky of getting infected by the virus, or taking up indirect problems like education, which is also very important, and you would like that it kind of suffers the least due to a disruption like this. So in that sense, we find the key role of something like entrepreneurship, and systems like this are helping to address the issue.
Do you see a role where mediation, and it was a question I asked before, could play a foundational support to the entrepreneurship process of educational learning within your development system?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think what is happening in a situation like this is that it is an opportunity for various sectors to kind of come together. One of the interesting things about the work that is happening in education is the fact that a lot of the companies we're talking about are working not just in India, but outside, and in that process are partnering with a number of groups across the world. So there is an opportunity to kind of both work together, learn from each other's experience, and find solutions that have been working in one area and implement them in other places. So I think the role for mediation and to kind of have this kind of impact by collaborating on these is extremely high.
Can I just add one fact about Indian perspective on COVID-19?
Yes, please.
Okay, there is a unique thing about here is that all the babies at birth, they get BCG vaccine for tuberculosis. And we have found that BCG vaccine somehow is restricting the multiplication of COVID-19 virus. So that is one of the big reasons why there may not be so many cases in spite of such a close population packed in small area. So BCG vaccine is credited for slowness of the replication of the growth of the virus in the body. So that is helping, which is not common in Western world.
Where is this vaccine? Doctor, can you explain a little bit more about the vaccine and where its origination is from and who's producing it?
Yeah, I think Dr. Shah is pediatrician. He deals with this almost every day. So I would like to let him mention, like,
Yes,
that BCG vaccine.
Yes, BCG vaccine, because of BCG vaccination, our immune system becomes strong. So we give all child to the BCG vaccines, all newborn babies. And this vaccine been produced by the Serum Institute of India.
So this is really, if I'm hearing you correctly, because of your audio, this is an HIV sort of.
No, not HIV.
No, not HIV.
Tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis
BCG
vaccine
meant for tuberculosis.
Okay, so the utilization of the tuberculosis vaccine is creating an immunization.
Yeah.
Against COVID-19.
Well, I think that's something. I think that's something that our wider medical community in the United States should definitely consider and and explore. Because if do you have data now that you're showing on this, Dr. Shah, that is being able to be shared with the larger, wider medical community?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. If I find it, I will definitely forward it to you. I have seen it in the literature.
And to my audience, those that will be listening to this, there may be an interest to reach out to Dr. Shah and to you, Dr. Mehta. So what we'll do is, as always, we'll have a link back to our podcast, to our website, and with your information, all of your information, each of our guests, so that if there is anyone that is listening to our shows that are interested in also getting a hold of you on these important topics, but also this particular medical insight that you have now raised, I think it would be an important impact to potentially society as a whole. So thank you for sharing that information.
And one thing is, that people are comparing COVID-19 with the flu, the influenza flu. And the big difference is that COVID-19 does not mutate as quickly as the influenza flu virus. So for flu vaccine to change it every year, but if we find the vaccine for COVID-19, hopefully it will be one vaccine good forever.
And that would be like polio. That would be a wonderful thing if we can find that secret sauce. But in between that, we have to figure out a way to still go on with humanity while we're trying to find we'll call it the equivalent of the polio vaccine, and work together, which is what we hope to reflect in our programming here with Connecting Bridges and Borders. I want to thank each of you for taking the time today to give us just a little bit of a glimpse, both on the medical side of what you're dealing with on the front lines relative vis-a-vis COVID-19, some of the economic implications that we have sort of touched upon from the lens of the healthcare system, as well as on the community outreach to try to address some of these issues. And then as well on the entrepreneurship level of how we can contribute towards not only the recovery, but then looking forward or outward into the future, tools that we can have available as we face these sort of unique pandemic challenges that perhaps may become more normalized and not as unique and novel as we are categorizing them to be in the future. So I really thank you from what I call the India perspective on Connecting Bridges and Borders today, and giving us a perspective of your lenses of what is happening there on the ground floor. Gentlemen, I want you to each be safe, and please, to your families, your loved ones, and everyone in India, please know that those here in the United States are with you, and there's a deep connection and closeness, especially on the East Coast, like states like New York and New Jersey, where really, it's a very important relationship on a friendship level, as well as, I believe, a geopolitical level, that we maintain a very close tie to India. And I hope it will only get stronger as the years come forward now.